Marcus Blackwood slammed his fist on the mahogany desk, sending crystal paperweights tumbling. 20 years. 20 years of hiring the world's most expensive consultants, MIT graduates, Harvard MBAs, and Silicon Valley geniuses. None of them could crack the code that was bleeding his empire dry. But as he stared at the handwritten solution on crumpled notebook paper, his hands trembling, one thought consumed him. This couldn't be real. The answer had come from Elena Rodriguez, the 19-year-old daughter of his night shift cleaning lady. A girl who'd never set foot inside a business school, never owned a suit, never even had a LinkedIn profile. Yet somehow, she'd just solved what had stumped the brightest minds money could buy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the glass towers of downtown Chicago as Marcus Blackwood's Bentley pulled up to the headquarters of Meridian Industries. At 52, Marcus had built his logistics empire from nothing, transforming a single delivery truck into a multi-billion-dollar operation that moved goods across 43 states. But success had come with a price that was slowly destroying everything he'd worked for. The elevator whisked him to the 47th floor, where his corner office commanded a view of Lake Michigan. His assistant, Patricia Wells, was already waiting with the daily reports, her face bearing the same concerned expression she'd worn for months. "The numbers are in from the overnight audit," she said, sliding a tablet across his desk. "We'd lost another $2.3 million in operational inefficiencies yesterday alone." Marcus didn't need to look. He knew the pattern by heart. For 2 decades, Meridian Industries had been hemorrhaging money through a problem so complex, so deeply embedded in their operations, that it had become known internally as the black hole. It wasn't fraud, embezzlement, or poor management. It was something far more insidious, a systematic inefficiency that seemed to multiply with every solution they attempted. The problem had started small. In the early 2000s, Marcus noticed occasional delays in their cross-country shipping routes. Packages would arrive late, trucks would sit idle at distribution centers, and fuel costs would spike without explanation. He'd attributed it to growing pains, the natural friction of scaling a business. But as Meridian expanded, the inefficiencies grew exponentially. By 2010, the company was losing millions annually to mysterious operational gaps. Marcus had hired Anderson Consulting, paying them $4 million over 18 months to analyze every aspect of their supply chain. Their 847-page report recommended restructuring their entire routing algorithm and implementing a new software system. The changes cost $12 million and made the problem worse. Next came the MIT team led by Dr. Jonathan Pemberton, a logistics theorist whose papers had revolutionized Amazon's delivery network. Pemberton and his researchers spent 2 years embedded within Meridian, mapping every truck route, analyzing driver behavior, and building complex mathematical models. Their solution involved artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms that cost $38 million to implement. The inefficiencies actually increased. Marcus had tried everything. McKinsey & Company charged him $14 million for a complete operational overhaul. Boston Consulting Group spent 16 months creating a revolutionary new management structure. He'd hired former executives from FedEx, UPS, and DHL. He'd implemented blockchain technology, invested in GPS tracking systems, and even brought in a team of behavioral economists to study his driver's psychology. Each solution had failed more spectacularly than the last. The black hole continued to devour profits, growing larger and more complex with every attempted fix. What started as a $2 million annual loss had ballooned to over $400 million in cumulative losses over 20 years. The inefficiencies had become so severe that several major clients were threatening to cancel their contracts. Last month, Marcus had called an emergency board meeting. The company's stock price had dropped 18% in the past quarter, and investors were demanding answers. Board member Catherine Armstrong had been particularly vocal, suggesting that perhaps Marcus had lost his touch, that maybe it was time for new leadership. "We've spent over $200 million on consultants," she'd said, her voice cutting through the tension in the boardroom. "At what point do we admit that this problem might be unsolvable? Maybe we need to consider selling the company while it still has value." The words had stung because Marcus feared they might be true. He'd built Meridian from nothing, working 18-hour days, sleeping in his first truck, eating gas station sandwiches while other entrepreneurs were securing venture capital. The company wasn't just his business, it was his identity, his legacy, his life's work. The thought of losing it to some inexplicable operational flaw felt like a cosmic joke. That same evening, after the board meeting, Marcus had stayed late in his office, staring out at the city lights and contemplating his next move. The cleaning crew had arrived around midnight, as they always did. He barely noticed them, the quiet efficiency of people who worked while the business world slept, invisible hands that kept the corporate machine running. Carmen Rodriguez had been cleaning Marcus's office for 3 years. She was a woman in her 40s with calloused hands and tired eyes, supporting 2 teenage children on a cleaner's salary. She worked the night shift because it paid slightly more, allowing her to be home when her kids left for school each morning. Marcus knew her name only because it was printed on her security badge, and he'd never spoken to her beyond the occasional polite nod. What Marcus didn't know was that Carmen had been quietly observing his business for months. During her cleaning rounds, she'd overheard countless phone calls about the black hole. She'd seen the frustration in executive meetings, the mounting stress in Marcus's posture, the way his shoulders sagged a little more each week. She'd watched consultants parade through the office with their expensive suits and confident presentations, only to leave months later with no real solutions. Carmen didn't understand business theory or logistics algorithms, but she understood patterns. Growing up in Honduras, she'd helped her father manage a small transportation business that moved goods between mountain villages. The routes were treacherous, the vehicles unreliable, and the margins impossibly thin. Success meant finding efficiency in chaos, making every mile and every minute count. It was a different world from Meridian's high-tech operation. But the fundamental challenge was the same: moving things from point A to point B without wasting time or money. More importantly, Carmen had a secret weapon that none of Marcus's expensive consultants possessed: her daughter, Elena. Elena Rodriguez was 19 years old and possessed a mind that worked differently than most people's. She saw patterns where others saw chaos, connections where others saw separate problems. She dropped out of community college not because she couldn't handle the work, but because traditional education felt like trying to run in shoes that didn't fit. Her professors taught theories. Elena instinctively understood systems. While her classmates were studying from textbooks, Elena was helping her mother understand the intricacies of the business world she cleaned for each night. Carmen would come home with stories about the problems she'd overheard, and Elena would listen with the intense focus of someone solving a puzzle. Over months, she'd built a mental map of Meridian Industries' operations, understanding the company's challenges better than some of the executives who worked there. 2 weeks ago, Carmen had mentioned the black hole to Elena over breakfast, not because she expected her daughter to have answers, but because the weight of watching Marcus struggle had become too much to carry alone. Elena had listened quietly, asked a few simple questions, and then retreated to her room with a notebook and pen. What happened next would change everything. Elena Rodriguez spread her notebooks across the small kitchen table in their cramped Chicago apartment. For the past 2 weeks, she'd been living and breathing Meridian Industries, transforming her mother's scattered observations into a comprehensive understanding of the company's operations. The walls of her bedroom were now covered with hand-drawn charts, route maps, and timing calculations that would have impressed any logistics professor. But Elena wasn't thinking like a professor. She was thinking like someone who'd grown up understanding that waste meant hunger, that inefficiency meant her family couldn't pay rent, that every resource mattered because there were never enough resources to go around. Her breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, while she was cross-referencing driver schedules with fuel consumption reports that her mother had photographed during her cleaning rounds. Elena had been staring at the numbers for hours, her eyes burning from exhaustion, when suddenly the pattern snapped into focus like a hidden image in a stereogram. The problem wasn't in the routes, the software, or the management structure. It was in something so fundamental, so obvious, that every expert had looked right through it. The timing of deliveries was creating a cascade of micro-delays that compounded exponentially across the entire network. Meridian's trucks were arriving at distribution centers during peak traffic hours, not because of poor route planning, but because the company's scheduling algorithms prioritized optimization over real-world conditions. The AI systems were calculating the shortest theoretical routes without accounting for human behavior patterns, traffic congestion cycles, and the ripple effects of delays. But the real revelation was deeper than that. Elena discovered that Meridian's efficiency problem was actually a side effect of being too efficient in other areas. The company had streamlined their loading processes so effectively that trucks were leaving distribution centers earlier than their destinations could handle them. This created a bottleneck where perfectly loaded trucks would sit in parking lots, burning fuel and racking up overtime costs while waiting for receiving docks to open. The solution was elegantly simple. Instead of trying to make deliveries faster, Meridian needed to make them more predictable. Elena had identified 17 specific timing adjustments that would synchronize the entire network. By delaying certain departures by as little as 30 minutes and rerouting others through less congested secondary roads, the company could eliminate the cascade failures that had been bleeding money for 2 decades. She worked through the night, calculating the potential savings. If her analysis was correct, implementing her solution would save Meridian Industries approximately $22 million in the first year alone, with additional savings growing each subsequent year as the network stabilized. By morning, Elena had filled 3 notebooks with calculations, route modifications, and implementation strategies. She'd created a solution that was simultaneously complex and simple. Complex in its understanding of systemic interactions, simple in its execution. The hard part was figuring out what to do with it. Carmen arrived home at 6:30 a.m., exhausted from another night of cleaning corporate offices. She found her daughter asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers covered in diagrams and numbers. Elena's mathematical hieroglyphics might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit, as far as Carmen was concerned, but she could see the intensity in her daughter's work. The same focused energy Elena had always brought to problems that captured her imagination. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's the thing, she replied. There's no name on it, just the document. Marcus flipped through the pages, his excitement growing with each section. The unknown author had identified 17 specific timing modifications that could theoretically eliminate the cascade failures. More importantly, they'd calculated the potential savings, $22 million in the first year. With exponential improvements as the network stabilized, the mathematical models were sophisticated, but the presentation was refreshingly straightforward. No corporate jargon, no buzzword-heavy executive summaries, just clear analysis and practical solutions explained in language that actually made sense. This is, Marcus paused, rereading a particularly brilliant section about synchronizing truck departures with traffic patterns. This is either completely wrong, or it's the most insightful analysis of our operations I've ever seen. There's more, Patricia said. Look at the implementation timeline. The final section outlined a phase-by-phase rollout strategy that could begin immediately with minimal disruption to current operations. The author suggested starting with a pilot program using just 5 routes, measuring results over 2 weeks, then expanding gradually. It was cautious, methodical, and completely feasible. Marcus reached for his phone. "Get David Chen up here. And call Dr. Pemberton from MIT. I want them to review this immediately." "Marcus," Patricia said carefully, "what if it actually works?" The question hung in the air. After 20 years of failure, after hundreds of millions in consultant fees, after watching his company slowly bleed to death, what if the solution had been sitting in an employee suggestion box? An hour later, David Chen and Dr. Pemberton were hunched over conference tables covered with printouts, calculators, and laptops. Marcus paced behind them, watching 2 of the smartest operational minds he knew dissect the mysterious document. "The mathematical modeling is sound," Dr. Pemberton said, adjusting his glasses. "Whoever wrote this understands complex systems theory at a graduate level, possibly beyond." David Chen looked up from his laptop. "I've been running their route modifications through our simulation software. The projected efficiency gains are substantial, if these calculations are correct. We're looking at immediate improvements in fuel consumption, driver productivity, and delivery reliability. But," Marcus sensed hesitation in their voices, "but the approach is so simple that it seems impossible we missed it," Dr. Pemberton said. "This person has identified what appears to be a fundamental flaw in our scheduling algorithms that every expert we've consulted has overlooked." David nodded. "The beauty of their solution is that it doesn't require new technology or major infrastructure changes. It's basically a matter of adjusting departure times and modifying routes to avoid predictable congestion patterns." Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with disbelief. "How confident are you that this could work?" "Confident enough to recommend the pilot program they've outlined," David said. "We could implement their Phase 1 modifications on Monday and have preliminary results by the end of next week." "Do it," Marcus said immediately. "Start with exactly the routes they specified. I want hourly progress reports." As David and Dr. Pemberton left to begin implementation, Marcus turned to Patricia. "I need to know who submitted this. Check security cameras, review access logs, interview the maintenance staff. Someone with this level of insight into our operations isn't anonymous by accident. Already working on it," Patricia said. "But Marcus, there's something else you should consider." "What?" "What if the person who solved this isn't someone we would normally listen to? What if that's exactly why they submitted it anonymously?" Marcus stared at the document in his hands. 8 pages of typed analysis that could save his company, written by someone who apparently understood his business better than he did. Someone who had observed his failures, analyzed his mistakes, and quietly developed a solution while he'd been paying millions to experts who couldn't see the forest for the trees. "Then we find them," he said. "And we find them fast." Patricia Wells had spent 13 years managing Marcus Blackwood's professional life, but she'd never seen him move with this kind of focused intensity. By Friday morning, he'd transformed into a man possessed, turning the search for their anonymous genius into a full-scale investigation. "Security footage from the 32nd floor break room," Marcus said, spreading printouts across his conference table. "Every person who approached that suggestion box in the past month, the images showed a parade of meridian, employees dropping various papers into the box, most of them brief complaints or suggestions scrawled on napkins or torn notebook paper. But the sophisticated analysis they'd received was clearly typed and professionally presented, which narrowed their search considerably." James Morrison, head of security, pointed to timestamps on the photos. "Most submissions happen during lunch breaks or shift changes. But there's something interesting here." He pulled out a specific image dated 3 days ago, showing a figure in a Meridian maintenance uniform near the suggestion box at 11:47 p.m. "Night shift," Marcus said immediately. Who has access to that floor after hours? Cleaning crew, security guards, and any executives working late, James replied. But the cleaning crew knows our systems better than anyone. They see everything, hear everything, and most people treat them like they're invisible. Patricia had been thinking along the same lines. Marcus, I've been reviewing the document structure. The language is too sophisticated for someone without higher education, but the presentation suggests someone who doesn't normally write business reports. It's like they understand the concepts perfectly but aren't familiar with corporate formatting. Marcus studied the security photo more carefully. The figure was small, wearing the standard blue Meridian maintenance uniform, but the image quality was too poor to identify specific features. Can we enhance this? Already sent it to our IT department for digital enhancement, James said. But there's a faster way. I can cross-reference badge access logs with the timestamp. Anyone who was in that area at 11:47 p.m. would have left an electronic trail. 20 minutes later, James returned with a single name, Carmen Rodriguez, employee ID 7439. Night cleaning crew. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. He'd seen that name countless times on security rosters and payroll reports, but Carmen Rodriguez was just another invisible service worker in his corporate world. He tried to picture her face and realized he couldn't. Bring her in, Marcus said. I want to talk to her immediately. Sir, Patricia interjected carefully. It's 10 a.m. She works the night shift. She's probably at home sleeping. Marcus paused, suddenly aware of how his desperation was affecting his judgment. He was about to haul a cleaning woman out of bed to interrogate her about a business document, which seemed both ridiculous and potentially illegal. You're right, he said, rubbing his temples. Schedule a meeting for this evening when she comes in. Make it voluntary, and make sure she knows she's not in trouble. But waiting felt impossible. The pilot program implementation of Elena's solution had begun Monday morning, and early results were already showing promise. Fuel consumption was down 11% on the modified routes. Delivery times were more consistent, and driver satisfaction reports were improving. If the trend continued, they would have undeniable proof that the anonymous solution actually worked. Meanwhile, the board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Marcus needed answers before Catherine Armstrong started asking questions he couldn't answer. By lunchtime, his impatience had reached a breaking point. Instead of waiting for evening, Marcus made an unprecedented decision. He was going to visit Carmen Rodriguez at home. This is insane, Patricia said as Marcus grabbed his car keys. You're a Fortune 500 CEO. You can't just show up at an employee's apartment unannounced. Patricia, someone in that woman's orbit just saved my company. I need to know who, and I need to know now. The address on Carmen's employee file led Marcus to a modest apartment complex in Pilsen, a working-class neighborhood on Chicago's southwest side. As his Bentley pulled into the parking lot, Marcus realized he'd never been in this part of the city before. The buildings were older, the streets narrower, and everything felt smaller and more lived in than the gleaming corporate districts where he spent his days. Apartment 2B was on the second floor, accessible via an exterior staircase. Marcus climbed the metal steps, his expensive leather shoes echoing in the quiet afternoon air. For a moment, he hesitated outside the door. Wondering if he was about to make a massive mistake, he knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing a faded Northwestern University t-shirt and jeans, and her expression shifted from confusion to alarm as she recognized him. Mr. Blackwood? Carmen's voice was barely above a whisper. Is everything okay? Did something happen at work? Ms. Rodriguez, I'm sorry to bother you at home. Could I come in? I need to ask you about something important. Carmen's mind was racing. In 3 years of cleaning Marcus Blackwood's office, she'd never spoken to him beyond polite greetings. Now he was standing at her door, looking stressed and desperate. Her first thought was that she was about to be fired, possibly arrested. Of course, she said, stepping aside. Please come in. The apartment was small but spotlessly clean, decorated with family photos and her children's school achievements. Marcus noticed a Northwestern University diploma hanging in the living room. Carmen had a bachelor's degree in business administration from 1998. Ms. Rodriguez, I need to ask you about something you placed in the employee suggestion box 3 nights ago. Carmen's blood went cold. Elena's solution. Somehow someone had traced it back to her. What do you mean? She asked. Though her expression had already given her away, Marcus pulled out a copy of Elena's document. This analysis of our operational problems. Did you write this? Carmen looked at the papers in his hands. Her daughter's brilliant solution, her daughter's potential future, her daughter's secret now exposed. She had 2 choices: lie and protect Elena, or tell the truth and hope Marcus Blackwood was the kind of man who would reward genius regardless of its source. No, she said quietly. I didn't write it, but you submitted it. Carmen nodded, unable to speak. Who wrote it? Marcus asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Carmen walked to the kitchen window, looking down at the courtyard where Elena used to play as a child. Her daughter was at the community college library now, working on assignments for classes that bored her, studying subjects that couldn't challenge her unique mind. My daughter, she said finally. Elena wrote it. Marcus felt the world shift slightly. Your daughter? How old is she? 19. What's her educational background? Business school. Engineering. Carmen turned to face him. She's a sophomore at Chicago City College, studying general education. She's never taken a business class in her life. Marcus stared at Carmen, trying to process what he'd just heard. The solution that had stumped MIT professors and McKinsey consultants had been developed by a 19-year-old community college student whose only connection to his company was her mother's job as a night janitor. That's impossible, he said. Though even as the words left his mouth, he realized he was about to eat them. Carmen smiled for the first time since opening her door. That's what I told her. Marcus Blackwood sat in Carmen Rodriguez's modest living room, staring at a framed photo of a young woman in a graduation cap and gown from Chicago City College. The girl in the picture had intelligent eyes and a slight smile that suggested she knew something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. Elena, he said, testing the name. Where is she now? At the library, Carmen replied, wrapping her hands around a cup of coffee she'd insisted on making, despite Marcus's protests that he didn't need anything. She spends most afternoons there working on her coursework and other projects. Other projects? Carmen hesitated. Elena doesn't just do homework. She finds problems and solves them. Last year, she redesigned the bus route schedule for our neighborhood and submitted it to the CTA. They actually implemented some of her suggestions. Marcus felt that familiar chill of recognition. She has a pattern of solving other people's problems. It's like she can't help herself. She sees inefficiency, and it bothers her until she fixes it. Carmen paused. She's been watching your company through my eyes for months, listening to my stories about the meetings I overhear, the stress I see in your face. She said someone needed to help, even if they didn't know they needed help. The board meeting was in 2 hours, but Marcus no longer cared about Catherine Armstrong's political maneuvering. He needed to meet the person who had saved his company, and he needed to understand how a 19-year-old had accomplished what teams of experts couldn't. Could you call her? He asked. Ask her to come home. Carmen pulled out her phone, then stopped. Mr. Blackwood, before I do this, I need to know something. Elena doesn't have connections, doesn't have a prestigious degree, doesn't fit the profile of someone your company normally hires. Are you here because you're grateful or because you're curious? Because Elena has been disappointed by institutions before? The question caught Marcus off guard. He'd come here expecting to find an ambitious insider trying to advance their career, or perhaps a disgruntled employee with access to confidential information. Instead, he'd discovered a teenager who had solved his problems out of pure intellectual curiosity and compassion for her mother's workplace stress. Ms. Rodriguez, he said carefully, your daughter may have just saved Meridian Industries from bankruptcy. Our preliminary results show her solution is working exactly as she predicted. I'm not here as a CEO evaluating an employee. I'm here as someone who desperately needs to understand how she did what she did. Carmen studied his face for a long moment, then dialed Elena's number. Elena? Can you come home, please? No, you're not in trouble. Someone wants to meet you. Just trust me, okay? 30 minutes later, Marcus heard footsteps on the exterior staircase. The door opened, and Elena Rodriguez walked into her family's apartment, carrying a backpack full of textbooks and a confused expression. She was smaller than Marcus had expected, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a Chicago Public Library t-shirt that had seen better days. But her eyes held the same analytical intensity Marcus had seen in the document that had changed everything. Elena, Carmen said, this is Mr. Blackwood. He's the CEO of Meridian Industries. Elena stopped mid-step, her gaze moving from her mother to Marcus to the papers scattered on their coffee table. She recognized her own work immediately. Oh, she said quietly. You found out. Marcus stood up, suddenly feeling overdressed in his $3,000 suit. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you really write that analysis yourself? Yes, sir. No help from professors, consultants, online resources. I used publicly available information about logistics theory and some transportation research papers I found online. But the analysis and solutions are mine. Marcus sat back down, running his hands through his hair. Elena, do you understand what you've accomplished? Your solution is saving my company millions of dollars. We've been trying to solve this problem for 20 years. Elena shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry I submitted it anonymously. I didn't think anyone would take it seriously if they knew it came from someone like me, someone like you. Someone without credentials, someone whose mom cleans offices. Elena's voice was matter-of-fact without self-pity. I know how these things work. Marcus felt a surge of recognition. 25 years ago, he'd been someone without credentials, someone people didn't take seriously. He'd built Meridian Industries by proving that outsiders could sometimes see solutions that insiders missed. Elena, walk me through your thinking process. How did you identify the problem? Elena glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. She moved to the coffee table, pulling out a notebook filled with diagrams and calculations. Mom would come home every night, talking about the stress at your office, how everyone was frustrated, but no one knew why. She mentioned the consultant meetings, the failed solutions, the mounting costs. I started thinking about it like a systems problem. She flipped to a page covered with flowcharts. Most of your consultants were looking at individual components, route optimization, software efficiency, driver performance. But they weren't looking at how those components interacted with external factors like traffic patterns, dock availability, and human behavior cycles. Marcus leaned forward, watching Elena's hands move across her diagrams with practiced confidence. The breakthrough came when I realized your trucks weren't just competing with each other for efficiency, they were competing with the entire Chicago transportation ecosystem. Every delivery truck in the city was following similar optimization algorithms, which meant they were all arriving at similar times and creating artificial scarcity at receiving docks. So you looked at it as a coordination problem rather than an optimization problem, Marcus said, beginning to understand. Exactly. Instead of trying to make each individual route more efficient, I focused on making the entire network more predictable. Sometimes being slightly less efficient in isolation creates massive efficiency gains for the system as a whole. Elena turned to another page showing traffic flow patterns overlaid with delivery schedules. Once I mapped your delivery times against citywide traffic data, the solution became obvious. You needed to desynchronize your operations from everyone else's, even if it meant taking longer routes or delaying departures. Marcus stared at the elegant simplicity of her approach. Every expert he'd hired had tried to optimize Meridian's operations in isolation, treating the company as a closed system. Elena had seen it as part of a larger ecosystem and found the harmony point where individual inefficiency created collective efficiency. "How long did this take you to figure out?" he asked. "About 2 weeks of research, then one night to put it all together." "1 night," Elena nodded. "Once I understood the pattern, the solution was straightforward." Marcus looked at this 19-year-old girl who had solved his 20-year problem in 2 weeks and wondered how many other Eleanors were out there, unrecognized and overlooked because they didn't fit traditional molds. "Elena," he said, "I have a proposition for you." Elena Rodriguez looked at Marcus Blackwood with the measured caution of someone who had learned not to trust promises from powerful people. "What kind of proposition?" Marcus glanced at his watch. The board meeting was in 90 minutes, but for the first time in weeks, he wasn't anxious about it. Instead of walking into that room as a desperate CEO clinging to his position, he would be presenting the solution to Meridian's most persistent problem and introducing the person who had made it possible. "I want to offer you a position at Meridian Industries," he said. "Director of Systems Analysis, reporting directly to me." Elena blinked. "I'm 19 years old. I'm a community college sophomore. I don't even own a business suit." "Eleanor, you just solved a problem that defeated teams from MIT, Harvard, McKinsey, and Boston Consulting. You identified patterns that some of the smartest logistics experts in the world missed. Age and credentials matter less than results." Carmen had been silent during their technical discussion, but now she spoke up. "Mr. Blackwood, that's very generous, but Elena needs to finish her education. She's planning to transfer to a 4-year university next year." "Actually," Marcus said, "I have a better idea. Meridian Industries has a corporate education partnership with Northwestern University. We could arrange for Elena to complete her bachelor's degree while working for us part-time, then transition to full-time after graduation. Full tuition coverage plus a salary that would let your family move out of this neighborhood if you wanted to." Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the courtyard where she'd spent her childhood. The offer was everything she'd never dared to dream of: financial security, intellectual challenge, recognition for her abilities. But something about it felt too easy, too good to be true. "What would I actually be doing?" she asked, turning back to face Marcus. "Initially overseeing the full implementation of your delivery optimization solution. But beyond that, I want you to look at every aspect of our operations with fresh eyes. The problems we don't even know we have yet. You're asking me to be a professional problem solver. I'm asking you to be exactly what you already are, just with better resources and bigger challenges." Elena looked at her mother, who was clearly torn between pride and protective concern. Carmen had spent her adult life in jobs that paid bills, but offered no path forward, no chance for advancement or recognition. The opportunity Marcus was offering Elena represented everything Carmen had sacrificed her own ambitions to provide for her children. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Blackwood?" Elena said. "Why didn't your expensive consultants see what I saw?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think it's because they were looking at our company from the inside, trying to optimize a system they already understood. You were looking at it from the outside, seeing how it fit into the larger world. Sometimes the best solutions come from people who aren't experts in the field. Or maybe," Elena said quietly, "it's because your consultants were all trying to prove how smart they were, while I was just trying to help my mom sleep better at night." The observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought about the parade of brilliant, ambitious professionals who had treated his company's crisis as an intellectual puzzle to be solved for career advancement. Elena had approached it as a human problem affecting real people, including her mother, who had to witness his frustration every night. "Elena," he said, "I need to be honest with you about something. Today's board meeting could determine whether I remain CEO of this company. Your solution may have saved Meridian Industries, but it definitely saved my career. I'm not offering you this job just because you're brilliant. I'm offering it because you saved me. Elena appreciated his candor. And if the board doesn't react well to your 19-year-old director of systems analysis, then we'll prove them wrong together. Carmen watched her daughter consider the offer, seeing the wheels turning behind Eleanor's eyes. She knew her daughter well enough to recognize when Elena was calculating probabilities and outcomes, weighing risks against opportunities. "I have conditions," Elena said finally. Marcus smiled. "I'm listening. First, I want to finish my degree at Northwestern, even if it takes longer because I'm working. Education matters, even if it's not the only thing that matters." Agreed. "Second, I want to hire my own team. If I'm going to analyze systems, I need people who think differently, not just people with impressive resumes. I want to find other overlooked problem solvers." Marcus nodded. "That sounds like exactly what this company needs. What else?" "Third, I want my mom to transfer from the cleaning crew to my department as an administrative coordinator. She has a business degree, and she understands this company better than most of your executives." Carmen's eyes widened. "Elena, you can't just—" "Mom, you've been invisible in this building for 3 years, watching problems and solutions while people treat you like furniture. It's time for that to change." Marcus looked at Carmen, really seeing her for the first time, despite working in the same building for years. "Ms. Rodriguez, Elena's right. We've been wasting your potential. Carmen struggled to find words. "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." "You helped raise the person who just saved this company," Marcus said. "I think you're more ready than you realize." Elena pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "One more thing. I want to implement a company-wide suggestion system that actually works. Not just a box that gets emptied once a month, but a real process for identifying and evaluating ideas from every employee, regardless of their position or background, because there might be other janitors' daughters with world-changing ideas." Marcus asked, "Because there are definitely other people in your company who see problems and solutions that management misses. You just need to create a way for them to be heard." Marcus stood up, feeling more energized than he had in months. "Elena, you have yourself a deal. All of it." Elena shook his hand, her grip firm and confident. "When do I start?" "How about Monday? But first, would you like to attend today's board meeting? I think they'd be very interested to meet the person who solved our operational crisis." Elena grinned, and for the first time Marcus could see the 19-year-old beneath the analytical genius. "Should I wear my library t-shirt or find something more corporate?" "Wear whatever makes you comfortable," Marcus said. "Trust me, after they see your results, they won't care what you're wearing." 2 hours later, Marcus Blackwood walked into the Meridian Industries boardroom with Elena Rodriguez at his side. Catherine Armstrong's prepared remarks about new leadership died on her lips as Marcus presented the operational improvements that had already saved the company $4.2 million in 1 week. When he introduced Elena as the architect of their salvation, the room fell silent. When Elena began explaining her methodology with quiet confidence, answering technical questions from board members who had decades more experience, the silence shifted from skepticism to amazement. "That's impossible." Catherine Armstrong gasped when Elena finished her presentation. "How did someone so young solve what our best consultants couldn't?" Elena smiled, the same slight smile from her college graduation photo. "Sometimes impossible just means no one has looked at the problem the right way yet." 6 months later, Meridian Industries reported record profits and industry-leading efficiency ratings. Elena Rodriguez, now 20 years old and halfway through her Northwestern degree, had identified and solved operational problems across 4 different departments. Her suggestion system had generated over 300 employee recommendations, 12 of which had been implemented for additional savings. Carmen Rodriguez had become one of the company's most effective coordinators, bridging the gap between management and frontline workers with insights that could only come from someone who had seen the company from both perspectives. Marcus Blackwood had learned, that sometimes the most valuable expertise comes not from prestigious institutions or expensive consultants, but from unexpected places where brilliant minds have been quietly watching, thinking, and waiting for someone to notice their potential. The maid's daughter had done more than solve a business problem. She had reminded an entire company that genius has no credentials, wisdom has no age limit, and the best solutions often come from the people who have been overlooked the longest. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.